It's time to get in touch with your intuition in order to stop people pleasing. My name is Amy Ballantyne. Welcome to Power to the People Pleasers. I'm so excited to have my guest, Amy Kemp, here today. Welcome, Amy.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
It's the Power of the Amy show today, and we're bringing it.
Love it.
So I'm excited to share your bio in a moment, but before we get into that, I would love if you can answer the question I ask all of my guests. Have you ever been a people pleaser? And if so, how did that show up in your life?
Mm, Yeah. While it's not at the top of my biggest struggles, what I do realize is that at the core of many, many situations in my life where I allowed things for too long, tolerated things for too long, didn't trust my intuition or my gut when I knew a change was needed, at the core, most of the time, was a concern about what people thought or
Mm,
making sure that everyone else was happy or worrying about how my decisions would impact other people. And
mm,
so, absolutely, I would say that it's something that I work at daily, trusting myself and really being quiet so that I can even hear that like tone of intuition that guides me for sure.
mm. I love this idea of being quiet. I love this because we're so busy, right? The lives we lead are so busy. So tell me a little bit more about obviously being quiet. Pretty
Yeah.
straightforward. What does that actually look like for you in your day?
I know. I've been thinking about this a lot because as the weather gets colder where I live and the days get shorter, I
Mhm.
find myself on my phone or on a screen even more than when I can be outside until later in the evening or just, there are more things to do.
Mhm.
And I find myself being really uncomfortable with the quiet or just wanting to fill it with something, even just to have a podcast on or music on or and so one of the disciplines that I would say has been a very vital part of my life, particularly as a person who has a really busy brain, always thinking, is just having a morning time that's set aside. And when I say, I always think people believe I do this 7 days a week at the same exact time. They I spend 3 hours in meditation and
Yeah, right. You've
journaling.
got 3 kids. Like,
No,
come on.
yeah, it's not happening. I would say on average 3 to 4 days a week.
Mm,
I have a room where there are no devices, no TVs,
mm,
no phones, no nothing. I have a basket of books, journals, things that I spend time with. That's where I receive the most,
mm,
where the quiet, where I can actually kind of, I think of it like plugging in my electric car, but plugging me into the source of all things so that like inspired ideas can flow through me. But that quiet is a discipline and it feels uncomfortable.
mhm.
Even more, like I said, I get myself even wound up more when I'm on my screen too much. So I definitely that is a I'm finding that having regular intervals of breaks
Mhm.
from input is like a part of the modern world that we all need. Uh,
Yes.
do you
And
feel
I
that?
love
I can
yes.
feel it through your response.
You know what? I love how honest you're being about this because I can relate. We moved houses almost 2 months ago now, and I was feeling a lot of chaos in that crazy time. And I only just recently got back to having sitting and quiet time. And I know people get like all about the word meditation. So I like to just call it quiet time as well, or just sitting in stillness, just sitting in a place with, like, as you said, no devices. Now, I use an app called Insight Timer to
Mhm.
help me feel better about taking the time because it plays very, I mean, it plays lots of different meditations, but what I really like is it plays soothing sounds of
Mm,
which you can figure out which sound feels good for you. And so I switch that up sometimes, but it sets a timer for me. So I know when I first started, it was like 5 minutes. I'll do 5 minutes. I could surely sit here for 5 minutes, right?
yeah.
Challenge yourself. 3 minutes, join, like pick a time. But now I'm working myself up. So I'm back to the 25-minute time of just sitting quietly as my brain goes out to, oh, I could be doing this or that or this or that. I'm like, no, 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 no. Come back, come back, come back. Just come back to quiet, come back to nothing, and just
Mm,
practicing that coming back to nothing in terms of no thinking, just being. Oh my gosh, I feel so much better. I think I've only done two. And similarly to you, I love how you said that you have a space,
mm,
like there's a spot that you go to. I have a little spot that's actually right beside me. It's got a little pillow and it's got a couple of stones that I like to hold on to, and the cards that I've gathered over the years, right? The
mhm.
angel cards and affirmation cards. So if I feel like having some kind of positive thought to think about as I close my eyes, then I have that. But it's just it's the spot.
Yes. Don't you feel also, like I said, in our modern world, the thing that will differentiate great thought leaders, leaders of businesses, creators, is people who are able to protect that space of receipt,
Mm.
because the amount and access of the voices of other people are so loud and they have such access to us that they didn't used to. I even think I feel bad for my kids sometimes because we could go home from school and not know if every other people were getting together, or we didn't
Yeah.
know what everyone else was doing. And so you had this blank time where you could kind of recharge. But I do think that will be a differentiator moving forward. People who can protect that space and still receive those deeper, more inspired ideas,
Mhm.
and then to put them into action in our world. I think that that will be a vital part of leadership and really just contribution from anyone moving forward.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. And
Mhm.
before we go any further, I want people to know how awesome you are. So let me
No,
just share.
sure.
Seriously, it's so great that you're here.
Yeah.
I've shared that you're a mom of three, but you
Mm,
do so much more. So you are the owner and CEO of Amy Kemp Inc. And this is a growing company. Amy is helping leaders and business professionals. She's led over 400 female leaders through a 4-month group engagement called Encounter. Her work is around habits. I'm so excited to learn about this. A certified habit finder coach. Very, very cool. And she has two engaging online courses, but many other things that she offers in terms of courses and support. And we're going to talk a little bit about your one that's called The Boundary is Not a Wall. Oh, yeah, baby. That sounds great. And your book launched this year, February 29, 2024, called I See You, a guide for women to make more, have more, and be more without more work. Oh, yes. So thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So let's jump into this concept, getting in touch with our intuition.
Mm.
You shared a little bit. We had a quick little chat to get to know each other, and you shared that you went through a transition 7 years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Very significant transition professionally. In fact, it was interesting. Today, I returned a copy machine that I had signed a lease for before the transition. And it was sort of like one of the final tendrils of this
Wow.
professional transition, dropping it off, that I no longer
Mm,
really need it in the context of the work I'm doing today. And I'm still sort of unraveling
mm,
from a role where I was very publicly leading an organization of over 1,000 salespeople across the United States, and really felt like that would be what I would do for the rest of my life,
wow.
until something inside of me changed. The world changed. Who knows what changed, right? But it became really obvious that I was being called to move to a different way of showing up in the world, a
Mm,
different line of work. And that transition required that I get very quiet. Very much, I could not get feedback from people, even the people that before were my trusted mentors, even my husband, because to him it was scary. It was terrifying to me. But here I'm at the top of the mountain leading the number one team in the entire country. And inside, I'm thinking, I think there's something else. And knowing that all the decisions I would make moving forward from there would impact a lot of people. And so the transition had to be done in a way that was thoughtful, knowing that not everyone would be in agreement, knowing that people would have their own experiences with that transition as they do and should and can, and that I wasn't responsible for all of that.
Yes.
It
That's big.
was a deep work, and I would say it still is. Even 7 years later, from I would say start to finish, I'm still, like I said, kind of pulling out tendrils of things that will still come to the surface periodically as I think through that. But I think transitions are necessary, and I think they have a lot for us if we pay attention and we don't rush through them. If we really learn and we address what comes up to the surface during them.
So beautifully said. And I'm curious, how did people pleasing, if it did,
Yeah.
play into that workplace that you used intuition to move to your next level?
Well, first of all the people I was leading were not pleased.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they and rightly so. I had invested in these people deeply, and they were so important to me. And in no way did I want to harm them or to bring harm to anyone through that transition, right? However, I had to really put the needs of my family, the needs of this inner knowing first, and recognize that I couldn't, not everyone was going to be happy. I remember one day I got a 10-page handwritten letter from a trusted friend. I mean, a really good friend who was really questioning my decisions and having to work through all of that. Just questioning my motives. Was I giving up? Did I, there were just a lot of things in this whole process that I had to sit with, the fact that I just had to move forward anyhow, whether or not that person understood. And I kind of had to really lean in on my own knowing more than I leaned in on someone else's guidance or belief in me or thoughts about what I should be doing or shouldn't be doing. I'm far enough on the other side now that it sounds really easy. Like,
But it's not.
but in the moment, I mean, there were just buckets of tears or lots of conversations with my own coaches. I definitely would say in a transition like that, no one should be alone. And the person who you are talking to about the transition should not have anything to do with the situation that you're leaving or where you're going. It has to be sort of a neutral party separate from that experience. Thankfully, I had some really great coaches who guided me through that time and provided a really safe space for me because it was trying. So definitely learned a lot. But here's what, when I look back on it, the thing I think the most, and I think this speaks to people pleasing. If people say, what do you regret? Or what do you look back? Do you have regrets? No regrets about what I built, what I learned, how I grew. No regrets there.
Amazing.
What I regret is that I didn't trust myself right away. I knew, and then I tried to push through for too long. Like there were a couple of years at the end where I kind of knew, but I was trying to just make it okay. And I would have trusted myself immediately and really just trusted myself. That's what I regret that I didn't do, because that's where the most damage was done, I would say, when I was out of alignment with my integrity.
What it sounds like on this side is that sometime in the future of your life, there may be an opportunity for you to Practice that,
Oh,
listening to your intuition as you make your next big transition, right? So,
I think about it all the time. This just came up this week since so I
yeah.
had some advice about things I should be doing in my
Uh,
business.
should.
And it was from an expert, like an industry expert, but
Yeah.
nothing in it aligned with the way I've ever grown a business or the way I work
Mhm.
or my gifting. And I was feeling all like janky inside, I was just feeling like weird. I would describe it like I didn't feel like I had it where
Mm.
I know and I do. I know and I do and I know and I do,
Mhm.
right? And all of a sudden I realized, oh, it's because I'm thinking I should be doing this to grow my business, but I've never done this.
Yeah.
I've always grown businesses by serving the person who's in front of me.
Mm.
If there's anyone on my path today who I can serve, like if there's anyone I can serve, put them on my path today and I will serve them. And serving them with integrity and presence and all that I have. And then my businesses have flourished. And I haven't had like these big strategic lead generating. I just haven't. I've just served people in front of me very
Mm.
authentically, and my business has grown. And I started to shift into this. I have to figure out this process and system. And then nothing was moving forward. Nothing felt fun. Nothing in me was like lit on fire. And then I was like, oh, it's because I'm not doing what I know to be
Yes.
true.
Yes.
Even now, like you said, I think it's a lesson you continue to learn over and over and
Mhm.
over again in different iterations.
Yes, and that you are trusting. Wait a second, this doesn't feel right. I 100%.
Oh, oh,
I'll have to edit it. That's okay. But what I'm going to do is we're going to I'm going to start again with that comment, but you need to be on the other side because
yeah.
you've
How did
shown
you
up on the
do?
wrong side. So
Did I
I'm
leave?
going to I'm going to leave also, and
Okay.
then I'll be in the right side, and then we'll get
Okay.
right
So
back
I
to it.
leave also and then come back.
Yes.
Okay, got
Yes.
it.
Sorry. I don't know what happened. Okay. There we
Okay.
go. Okay, here we go. So I can 100% relate to what you're talking about, what you're sharing about having the experts tell us certain things. I'm not suggesting those people aren't experts because they have had their own success, but it's tapping into your own knowing, your own intuition around what feels aligned and what really works for you. I'm so grateful that you shared that story. Thank you. Thank you. I'd love if you can dive into this concept of a boundary is not a wall.
No.
Like that, I mean, you don't have to give away the whole course because that's something people can reach out to you for. But I'd love if you can maybe explain what you mean by that and maybe give us one strategy around boundaries in your perspective.
Sure. So this is actually in a chapter of my book I See You also,
Mm,
but it stemmed from just an observation working with a lot of women who I observed being what I might stereotypically say a beast in the boardroom, very in charge, very domineering, take charge, nobody's taking advantage of me, sort
mm,
of I'm going to get things done, fiercely independent, right? Uh,
amazing.
this sort of caricature, even.
Mhm.
I would observe this person who I was working with then go home and, in some context, whether that be a marriage, a partnership, a friendship, a parenting relationship, familial relationships, anything, become a complete doormat where there were no boundaries and people were walking all over them.
Wow.
And I was just astonished at how frequently I was seeing the same two things exist within one person. And so I created what I call the boundaries spectrum. So if you can imagine a line, and let's say on the left side would be walls, very thick, high. I'm not vulnerable. No one really knows me. I take care of everything myself. You're not coming in here. I'm in charge. Walls, right? Keeps out anything that might hurt you. Also keeps out any vulnerable, intimate, real, authentic relationships.
Yeah.
On the totally opposite end of the spectrum is no boundaries. Anything goes. I'm constantly putting everyone else's needs before my own. I have no sense of where I end and you begin. It's just all blended. Your needs are my needs, right?
Yeah.
This is no walls. Everything's allowed in. Everything. What I realized, if you can imagine that line, if you took the two ends of the line and bent them and connected them at the top, you'd have a circle. And what I realized is that the experience of living behind thick walls and having no boundaries is eerily similar.
Mm.
Very isolated, very powerless, very stressful, lonely. There's this constant vigilance around the energy of it. And so I actually think both extremes have the same origin. What we're aiming for is what's in the middle of the boundary spectrum, which is boundaries, a very flexible, permeable, bendable, shapeable, movable way of keeping out the things that might harm you or not be good in your life, but also allowing in the good,
Mhm.
allowing in real relationship and connection and community while still protecting yourself. And so, this idea of not being walled up, not allowing everything, but having this very nuanced experience of life is what we're aiming for, is that you're
Wow.
protected, but also open.
I love that, and I love how, clear you
Mm.
painted that picture for people to understand that there is a spectrum of boundaries. Very, very cool. You know, as we move through this topic of getting in touch with our intuition, I'm curious how this relates for you to, being a habit finder coach.
Mm. Yeah. Well, first of all, the kind of the habits that I work with people on are habits of thinking. So
Mhm.
if you can imagine 100% of our thoughts, 80% of them are happening below the surface at the subconscious level. We're largely unaware, thankfully. I mean, we don't want to think about breathing or blinking or all of the things that our subconscious mind helps us do. And yet, there are a lot of subconscious habits of thinking that are showing up in our work, in our relationships, in our interactions with the world that are having an impact that we are completely ignoring or
Mhm.
unaware of. And so I use a tool called the Habit Finder that basically takes a snapshot of all of those subconscious habits of thinking and sort of brings them into the light. I remember the first time I took it, I worked with a coach who used this assessment tool. I was flabbergasted. I was a little miffed. I was sort of like, how did you? Because I didn't even really know that, right? It reminds me, this morning, I was playing pickleball this morning, and the guy I play with, I'm fairly new to pickleball, and the guy I play with, he was like, "How come every time you're swinging through, you kind of stop halfway?" And I was like, "I don't stop halfway." And then the game, that's what I was thinking in my head. I was like, "I don't know." Then the game continued on. I stopped halfway half the time, and I was like, I don't know. Why do I do that? That's how it felt. Like I was unaware I was doing that. But once he said it, all I could think about the whole rest of the morning was like, why am I stopping halfway? Just swing through. It's like that, where I'm not aware, but I'm doing it all the time.
Yes.
Yes. So, as far as intuition goes, our habits of thinking, I would say, are sort of in that mix, right,
Mhm.
of intuition. It's your default when you're not thinking about it. What do you go to as
Mhm.
sort of the thing that you do without knowing it. I'll
Yeah.
give you an example of a habit of thinking that impacts a ton of people. It's a habit of thinking that on the little measurements that we use moves toward obligation.
Mm.
So it sounds like this: I have to, I need to, I should.
Yes.
And it's very draining habit of
Mhm.
thinking. I describe it like if you're creating something, building a business, a career, it's like climbing a mountain. There's natural resistance. This habit of thinking is like strapping on a 100-pound backpack while you climb the mountain.
Because someone said you should, or you need to, or you have to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's pervasive and it affects everything. So
Yeah.
these habits of thinking, if you start to notice them, you start to notice yourself saying, "Oh, I really need to go to the gym," or "I should be drinking more water," or that project, I need to get going on that project." And you just start to hear it everywhere. It's everywhere that you go. So our intuition is like this internal guidance system. But the problem is when we turn off our intuition in one area, we can't access it in all of the others. So if I have turned off my intuition that says, my boss should not be speaking to me this way, it's disrespectful and rude, but I have to override that to survive. And I'm just allowing it, allowing it, allowing it. And I'm shutting off my intuition. Every time it happens, I think this is not okay. My intuition is saying, no, alarm bells, but I'm overriding. Are you there? I thought I
Yes.
lost you. Okay. I'm overriding. Then I can't access my intuition when I need it to just make a simple decision about I'm tired and it's time to go home from work. Or am I hungry? Or am I tired and I need to go to bed? Or all of the things I need to just sit down on the chair and rest instead of doing the dishes.
Yeah.
All of our intuition, I lose access to it when I shut it off in one area or
Wow.
I cover it up.
That's really powerful reminder, I think, for people to recognize that their thinking traps are a part of this situation, right? So I'm curious, as we wrap up our time together, what is your key takeaway, the key message that you want to leave the listeners with?
Mhm. The key message is also the core message of my book, which is just that you can't outwork your thought habits.
Mhm.
There will come
Yes.
a time where working harder is not the answer.
Mhm.
It cannot solve the problem. And doing just more or harder work will become detrimental, even to the point of making your body sick
Yep.
and forcing you to stop. I can't tell you how many times in the last year I have spoken with a leader or a person who came to me from a referral and said, "You're going to get sick if you keep on doing what you're doing." There comes a time where you, instead of working harder and relying on that survival instinct, are going to have to dig deeper and to really do some more like inner work to get to the next place that you want to go. So I think
Mhm.
that would be the main thought, is that you can't outwork these habits of thinking. There's a tipping point where it becomes very detrimental and even dangerous. And so really stopping and addressing that before it gets to that point is the goal, so that you can really grow yourself and move to the next place.
Mm. So powerful. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. Thank you for being here today. For all of the listeners, Amy is making available a free habit finder assessment. So that will be linked below, as well as all of her links to her website and social media, so you can connect with her. This phenomenal woman. I'm so grateful that you were here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
And for all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in yet again to our show. And stay tuned for the next episode of Power to the People Pleaser.